Good afternoon, everyone. This is Greg Stumpf out here in Norman, Oklahoma with the Meteorological Development Lab Decision Support Branch. And welcome to our next edition of the VLab Project and Community Owners Meetings. We haven't had one of these since last July. We're usually going about a quarterly schedule here with these meetings. So the owners meetings are your chance to learn a little bit more about what's coming new in the VLab that may affect the work that you do to create your communities and our projects on the VLab. There's a lot of exciting new stuff that's come down the pipe in the last few months here that Ken Sproul is going to talk about. So we do these every so often. We'll talk about what's new. We might provide some demos of some of the new things that are in the VLab. Then we do a community and or project spotlight. And today it's going to be Greg Romano from the National Weather Service Heritage Community, which is quite exciting community on the VLab. And then we'll finish with a roundtable question and answer session at the end. So anyway, without further ado, go ahead and hand this off to Ken Sproul, who's going to be telling us what's new in the VLab. So Ken, you're unmuted, and I will go ahead and share the screen with you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Greg. So let me go ahead and do that. So first off, I want to give an update on some of the things that we're actively working on within VLab. And so one of the major things that we're having to do is implement something called ICAM, which is NOAA's single sign-on solution. It's using something called SAML authentication on the background. And that's, you might ask, well, VLab already has single sign-on, and we do, and we're using Google single sign-on. We implemented that a few years ago. NOAA is moving in this other direction where they want everyone to go through this. And one of the advantages of the ICAM authentication is that it does support CAT card authentication. So you have to type in a PIN, but you can use your CAT cards, assuming you have one and you've got a CAT card enabled laptop. If you don't, or computer, if you don't, then you would have to type in your credentials. Now, we didn't want our users who are used to having Google authentication to lose that. So what we're doing is, for the services where we already have Google authentication in place, we're trying our best to implement it so that it'll support both Google authentication as well as the ICAM implementation. So that's taking a fair amount of our resources at the moment. We have Jenkins working with it in our dev tier, VLCS, as well as Garrett, and then we're working through the issues of having to support multiple authentication schemes, and that complicates things a little bit. And then we've started the process for Redmond, so that's underway, and we're, like I said, continuing to work on that. Other things that we've been doing is the cloud effort, and that's something that I'm going to give a demo of the cloud and how that works. And that actually ties into the other topic I wanted to talk about, and that is continuous integration and continuous delivery. And that's something that continuous integration is the building. So this is tied to the project side of VLab. And on the project side, we've had Jenkins as a service, and that's been there, from the start. Unfortunately, because of the nature of each build for software projects is different, and being hosted within IDP is somewhat restrictive with regard to changes. So that hasn't been necessarily a good fit there. But that then ties into the work that we've been doing within the cloud. And so over the past year, we've been prototyping within the cloud as a bigger project, not necessarily directly related to VLab, but I've been leading that effort for MDL. And so I, as a technical lead for VLab, I obviously saw ways in which we could streamline the processes for VLab. And so we've done a couple prototypes of this, one for Iris, and also some work for AWIPS, where we can actually spin up ephemeral. So in other words, we can have Jenkins running within a cloud environment and have it be looking at the repositories back within VLab. And when changes get made, we can actually configure an instance which is unique to the build requirements for a particular project. So that gives us a lot of flexibility, and it's not quite so rigid as the IDP, the FSMA high environment. So we can do a lot. And so there are other resources available. We're using Amazon Web Services. We're going through NOAA's the WOC and the CIO's office there, and the Web Operations Center. So we've procured those services, and so we have the flexibility to configure things. So anyway, we've been doing prototyping in that area, and contingent upon funding, this is an area that we can greatly expand into, and it's been an area that I think is very exciting. It can do a lot for NOAA in terms of security scanning and building and delivering of the repository of these continuous delivery, which is basically building of software. You build, whether it's executables or jar files or modules, those, and what we've been doing is pushing those to S3, which is an object store within the cloud, and then we can make those available for people to download. So we're, Jason Burks, one of our lead engineers, has done work in this area with regard to AWIPS, and so we've been able to build AWIPS RPMs, and it's our intention to extend this and do more so that, as people check in changes, those RPMs can be built, like on a weekly schedule or month or daily, depending upon the project's needs. So, and then there's also a backlog that we have from other projects like fisheries and other groups that I know they have wanted to do other things with regard to their projects that then, just wasn't possible because we didn't have the flexibility to install the necessary dependencies to do what they needed to do to, scan their code or build the code and things like that. So anyway, that's something that's up and coming. There's still, it's not solid in terms of that I can announce that, yeah, this is available for everyone to use, because there are cost implications, within running in the cloud. It's very reasonable, but, if you've got jobs that take hours and hours or days to run, you have to pay for the computing time within the cloud. And then also, if you've got very large deliverables, there are costs. While small, there are some certain costs with that. So we need to work with Steve Smith, the head of VLab, to determine how we best want to handle these sorts of things moving forward. So that's that. We're also, always keeping in mind, we want to provide the best services possible to our customers. And so I did come up with an estimate for Steve with regard to, hosting VLab within the cloud. Today, as most people probably know, there was a significant outage as a result of the infrastructure. So that's a reminder that while things were very solid for quite a number of months, there's been some instability as of late, and our experience within the cloud over the last 15 months is that we've experienced no instability. So that doesn't imply that or mean that it could never happen there, but it seems like that might be a possibility, and so we're working through that. But there are, again, our cost implications of running it within infrastructure within the cloud as opposed to within IDP. So, and then also there are some other things to work through, like the MDS tool for satellites and air. things like that, where those applications are pretty important and also require connectivity, like from within AWIPS. So, so those are things that we're currently engaged in. And so with that, I'm going to show you what we've been doing with regard to cloud, our cloud efforts. And so this is in support of specifically AWIPS program. And so a lot of the work that we did over the last year in prototyping was a demonstration to management within AWIPS that you know, the cloud is a very good location for testing, development, and not necessarily performance testing, because it's a slightly different thing, but for, you know, development efforts. And so we've moved forward. And so what we've done is we've developed tools within VLab that allow people within the AWIPS community. And so this is being basically the way that this works is that the AWIPS program communicated to the regions, and the regions then said, okay, published that, okay, we've got a need to do, so it was identified by our group that AWIPS is going through an upgrade. They didn't have or there wasn't a good way of testing the move from Python 2 to Python 3. And so it was suggested by Jason Burks that, oh, we could actually do this within the cloud. And so, so what's happening is the people that have permission can come in here, go to the cloud request. So there's a form here, simple form, where you can make a request for an instance type. You give a description, you specify that currently we only have one template. So it's AWIPS 20.1, Python v2. So that request goes in. I'll go ahead and do a test one. And test. So the submission goes in, and then there's an approver list, and that's defined at the community level. Everything we've built is organized in such a way that if the cloud efforts extend beyond just AWIPS, it could be done within other communities too. Of course, there has to be funding to support this, and so, you know, for these efforts, there definitely are going to be costs involved, and so money is being transferred to support it. So within here, then there's another set. So we've got our cloud user interface, and so my request was sent out. Now I haven't in this environment. I am not an approver, so it's not showing up. The approver isn't showing up. But if I add myself, I can actually show you within our other environment where I am. And we'll come into here. Actually, I don't need to go there. I can just go here. So here you can see view requests for approval, and then there are no pending requests at this point in time. So I'm going to go ahead and submit another one just within the dev tier, and we'll do that. So if I go into the AWIPS community where we've defined that form, so let's do okay, and then I get an email as the approver within this. It's a little bit funky because I'm the requester and the approver, but just for demoing purposes, I'll do that. So I can then go in and view requests for approval. So there's an entry here. Then you process it, and you can either accept it or reject it, and you can make changes to it as well. So if I were to accept this instance, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay. So then as a user then, they would get an email notification, and then they're going to have access to their instances. So these are different instances, and you can see that this is the one that I just created. So what happened behind the scenes here is that programmatically, we went through and we used a template and created a cloud instance, like a virtual machine, and tagged it properly for accounting purposes and things like that. And then it spun up, and actually there was a process that's running that's going to shut this down because you get paid for the amount of time that these instances are running per hour. And then, but what does this then allow someone to do? So it allows them to go in and go to the connection info. And so they can actually hit this URL then. And these instances here are, they have they're desktop enabled. And so they're actually using the technology that allows for the instances we're spinning up within AWS actually have GPUs, graphical processing units associated with them. And there's advanced rendering. So if anyone knows anything about AWIPs, Cave requires direct rendering from a GPU. And so we're actually able to do this within the cloud. And so you can, what we've spun up then are instances that have a real-time data feed from the SVN. They're processing the data, and they've got Cave, a full workstation. So if we were to go to this instance, you would be able to log in and actually see and work with Cave within it. And then the intention for these experiments or this process that we're going through with this project is that they're actually then going to test their scripts using Python 3 and where they were written with Python 2. So that's the process from start to finish from the end user. Now within the administration perspective, we have an administrative interface. And so this is where we as the administrators can come in and we can define new templates. We can manage the instances themselves. And so it's basically the intention here is that it's giving us the ability to, if you're at all familiar with the AWS environment and the AWS console, it's quite complicated, and there are a lot of different options. And I'll just drag it over just so you can get a sense for it. So these are EC2 instances. These are VMs that are running. This is one of thousands of different pages that are available. So it's a bit overwhelming. And so we didn't want to have require users to go through there. We wanted to provide them with an easy way of going in and controlling the instances. The other thing that we can do that I didn't show is that it also allows the users to come in here and control them, not just get the connection information, but now you can see that that demo one has been stopped, which is the way it's designed. But if I needed to work on it, I would come in here and click on start. And so that would start the instance. And part of our training, because it's a change in paradigm, is when people are working, we're training them to, you need to stop the instance when you're done working with it, because you're paying about 50 cents per hour basically to run these instances. And while that doesn't seem that big when you're talking 30 instances, it adds up over time. So anyway, that is a summary of the cloud work that we've been doing within VLab. And I guess at this point, if anyone has any questions pertaining to this, you could raise your hand and we can unmute you.
So any questions for Ken? Use the raise your hand feature or the question feature within the dashboard. Okay, we've got Got a question right now? Go ahead.
This is Jianwu, and can we also apply for the cloud? This cloud because I don't uh, have this where I can apply for the cloud.
So who's speaking and what project?
Jianwu,
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
Jianwu, just call me Wu Mei, Jianwu.
Okay, and
Mhm.
are you working with AWIPS or?
Oh, I'm working on the gaps, the EMC gaps, the ensemble for global forecast.
Okay,
Yeah.
so so
We
at
are
this
also working on the how to use the AWS to run the gateway system. So yeah, we so if this can all can work on, we can use this instance to run the our cases.
So this effort here has been focused on the project we've been doing within MDLNet, which is as so so we established a contract with NOAA and it's been isolated to the AWIPS program and then resources that are running within MDL on premise. And we've got a number of resources that we do for like preview. So like displaying ensemble data and the national blended models. Um, those are some of them. And then we also got some additional funding to host a couple applications that are used by EMC for the Met Express and Met Viewer applications, which show statistics for the numerical models. So those efforts are running within this environment. There are most likely some additional cloud type projects, and I know that NOS has a significant, you know, set of projects that they've been running within the cloud within Azure, which is a Microsoft environment, and that's completely independent of what we're
Okay,
doing here.
I see.
If it was determined that there was another project, that's established, it might be possible to tie it in. We do have, I didn't highlight it, but there are some settings and things that we established, but you have to tie it in with an account and things like that. Because of course there are real cost implications of if someone misuses this, that it wouldn't be a good thing. So.
Okay, yeah, yeah, we are working on it. We have some credit to use in the AWS. So I thought
Right.
this is our the NOAA, so we can just use it.
No, unfortunately,
Okay.
it's not that simple. So,
Thank you. Yeah,
okay,
thank you
you're
for the
welcome.
clarity. Mhm.
Hey, thanks for your question, Jan. We've got Brian Mata has his hand up. Go ahead, Brian. You're unmuted.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Okay, two questions. One is the NESDIS has a cloud effort underway as well, and I'm wondering if there's any cross cloud or multiple cloud efforts where Weather Service and AWIPS are involved with them. Also, the Unidata project, they have their AWIPS in the cloud, and I
Right.
wonder if there's any tie-ins with them either.
So with regard to NESDIS, we were aware that when I started investigating this, I actually spoke with several individuals or a couple individuals from NESDIS to get an understanding of how they were doing things and basically lessons learned. So that's the extent of it. There's no real pollination other than that. Um, we are in the process of writing a white paper at the request of Steve Smith, um, basically on how to leverage the cloud, how best and establish governance and things like that for the National Weather Service. So that's something that just started. With regard to the Unidata, that's I think that they're using a similar technology. We're using something called DCV for the presentation within a browser. You use a DCV server, and that then allows you to use a direct rendering in the GPUs. So, but there's no additional collaboration other than that. I mean, the solution we have, again, Jason Burks was instrumental in documenting this and getting it set up. And he's the one that's managing these instances. And it's not magic. You still have to do work. Within the cloud, you still have to get the RPMs from AWeBs, and you have to install it, get everything dialed in. But the beauty about the cloud, and this could be said true of VMs, is that once that's been done, you basically create a template or an image of it, and then that can then be used moving forward, so that when additional people need access, you just hand it off. So you don't have that spin up time, which can be considerable for AWeBs and for other projects too. It cuts that down considerably. So I don't know so those are my responses, Brian.
Okay, yeah, just one more question. The satellite community is obviously very interested in the progress with the cloud and the cloud AWeBs. And is there anything we should be aware of in the way of graphics cards or hardware compatibility, that we'll need to plan for to be compatible with the direct GPU requirement?
Not that I'm aware of, because the GPU is that's in the cloud. So that's why these instances are more expensive. So you're paying for an instance that virtually has that GPU within it. So it's not, my understanding of it is it's not dependent upon a high-end workstation on your end, because it's actually using the processing and everything is taking place within the cloud, and then it's then just a matter of, it's effectively screen sharing back to you, so that as long as you have a machine with a fast enough internet, then that's what's being worked. And I know some of the other things that are being thought of is thin client, and if potentially some of this could, at some point in the distant future, be used for for other applications like fire weather and things like that. So I know that's something that the AWeBs program is looking into. So.
Okay, so if there's no GPU specifics, are there any bandwidth or workstation configurations that are suggested?
I'll have to get back to you on that. So I've got a number in my head, but I want to make sure it's right. So with regard to bandwidth. So.
All right. Thanks for all the info. Sorry for all the questions.
Nope. Questions are good. So, all right. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. We've got another question from Frank Alsheimer. You are unmuted. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, the idea, and this maybe piggybacks off of some of what Brian was asking, but certainly the thing that comes to mind when I see the possibility of these virtual instances is, you've talked about having the live data for things like thin client, but the potential for it replacing or at least substituting at times for the WES that we use in our forecast offices. Right now, the WES program it needs some significant modernization as to how we save and collect data. It's everything is done on an individual office basis, and there's no effective way for sharing the same amount of data to be able to use for our training purposes. So I was wondering if you're aware of anything potentially being set up along these lines for that kind of idea.
Yeah, so Jason Burks and I were both involved with, so Scott Jacobs is leading, the project for AWeBs. And so with regard to that, we have meetings every other week, and Dale Morris from the Warning Decision Training Division is included on those calls. And he's one of the things, it wasn't the first step, because the first step is what you're seeing now. But it's in the not so distant future, it's like this next year, we're going to be dedicating efforts to the archiving, and then Wes. Dale is the one that's responsible for Wes, but we're going to be looking at, and we've already got ideas on how to store data, because storing data within Glacier, which is an object store for archive type data within AWS, is fairly inexpensive to store large amounts of data, and so it just takes a little bit of time to retrieve it. So so yes, the short answer is yes, it's definitely being considered, and it's one of the requirements and one of the things that we're working towards. So it's in the not so distant future.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Frank. Any other questions from anybody else for Ken? Use the raise your hand or the question feature. Okay, looks like the board remains clear. So thanks a lot, Ken, for the demo and the news updates on the VLab. We'll move right along, and we're going to introduce Gregory Romano, who's going to talk about the NWS Heritage Community, and we've just got him connected there. So, Greg, you are unmuted. Go ahead.
Thanks so much, Greg, and much appreciate the time today. With apologies to Monty Python, and now for something completely different. This is, I think, a little bit different than what you guys have seen before on the VLab communities, but it's been incredibly successful for us in the NWS Heritage projects, and and lots of kudos to Ken and Tao Pham and others, the VLab development team who helped us get here. I wanted to start with just a little bit of context. This really came about, I guess it was maybe almost 3 years now, when Dr. Uccellini came to me. Then I was the Weather Service Communications Director, and Darren Jones when he was the Deputy Chief of Staff, and said, we need to rebuild our history program. And Darren and I, for about a year, sort of pointed at each other and said, not it. And because we had day jobs, I mean, we knew this was going to be somewhat of a heavy lift, but about a year ago, we sort of set out in force to do this. And then in April of this year, I've been doing it full time. But really, this site goes back more than a year ago, when Darren and I first started having conversations with Steve Smith. And we thought that what we wanted to do was build a crowdsourcing effort. Well, that wasn't going to fly for obvious reasons. We in the Weather Service just can't deal with the security issues of having sort of a pure wiki, which is what we had originally thought of. And so we built it as a little bit more of a traditional website. And we knew that going to VLab would help us get us there. From day one, we had a couple of goals. One was to create a one-stop shop for all things Weather Service heritage. Ultimately, we envision that a researcher should be able to start at the timeline, which I'm about to show you, read an overview, and then link to additional source documents such as journal articles, oral histories, and the like in one place. And the reason we wanted to do that was that there's no one clear place that people can go to find Weather Service heritage or history information. It's all over the place. I mean, those of you who are out in regions, in WFOs and RFCs, national centers, you've all dealt with or seen heritage or history pieces, but there's no real one place to go to find that information. And we wanted to really solve that. So this is becoming a collection of all those things. We're really only in the infancy stages of the material that's there, and we'll continue to build it in the years to come. Certainly, the Weather Service 150th anniversary that is going to be in February was the catalyst for getting this done, but it's been needed for years, and we're really building on a lot of the efforts of previous folks of folks you know, folks like Bob Glahn and Gary Grice and others who have written books, produced other materials, and they have been essential in helping us get there. So what I wanted to do today is just walk through a couple of the key elements for you, and then I'm going to have Ken talk a couple of next step items that we've got coming down, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about some lessons learned. One other aspect of something I really wanted to make sure we said, we needed this to be super simple for us and the Heritage team, Heritage Projects team to build out. We're really talking very few people here. It's me as Heritage Projects lead. I've got a quarter time of Mary Fairbanks from the Weather Service Communications team. We recently hired a contractor, a writer-editor, to help us prepare some of these materials. And then we have two NRAPs working with us, Chris Gillert from Central Illinois and Dan Valley from WFO Pocatello, who've been really essential in building some of this information. They've been incredible partners in this for us. But you know, Mary and I aren't techies, so we needed this to be simple to use and simple to work with, and we've really got a product that helps us do that. So a couple of key elements here. You start at Explore NWS History, and what's really cool about this is just a simple timeline where you can scroll through a short narrative about our history, including some of the predecessors and pioneers of the firm, and then you kind of get into some of this information about Increase Lapham and Isa Hoare doing early work before the Civil War. And then of course, there become a lot of calls for creating a service. You can kind of scroll through, and I'm not gonna, you can do that at your leisure. But then you also get it, you can also scroll to a specific point in time. And I'm gonna jump ahead here to 1938, because I also wanted to point out a feature we're starting to add. So in here, we have a couple of cool things about the Long Island Express. This is one of those defining moments in our history where this was sort of showcased the advantages of dynamic meteorology over analog methods. We have, of course, as a result of Dr. Willis Gregg had just passed away, and then Francis Reichelderfer comes on board. And as many of you know, he was sort of a real beacon, if you will, of a leader within the Weather Bureau for 25 years. And what you see here in this little block, we just, in the timeline, just give a little introductory thing on who was this guy and why was he important. And what we're doing now that we've got much more in the way of stories is we're starting to add read more links to the actual timeline, which then takes you to a story that we have in here about Dr. Reichelderfer. And we pulled this directly off of an article that was prepared for the old 200th, the NOAA 200th anniversary site back in 2007. But what we've done, and we're following some protocols that that the research community has asked us to include, such as if you're going to pull it from a site, and I'm not going to link to it because I don't want to get away, but when we accessed it, so that this would be one of those typical research things that you would do. And you can see we've got that story and the pictures that were included in that site, and it walks through a really nice story about Dr. Reichelderfer. The other interesting thing that we're doing is we're adding more and more to linking to original content. This story here, I'm going to talk a little bit. Our social media campaign just appeared this last week, as we I don't think celebrate is the right term, but we recognized the anniversary of the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald on November 9th. And again, you have a story here that was written by our writer, Emily Senesac, but we have a link here to a really good page that WFO Marquette built about the Edmund Fitzgerald. And then we also have links down here to some of the other items that are particularly relevant to this story. As many of you know, we were founded in 1870 in large part to protect both mariners on the Great Lakes and protect commerce on the Great Lakes. So, here we are in 1975, 105 years after that, and we have this absolute tragic shipwreck on the Great Lakes, and it takes you back. So you're able to kind of click on these things and it takes you back to the timeline where it talks about some of these items that were happening prior to 1870 that sort of drove this idea that we needed to have this national weather service. And that's a key aspect of what we're trying to include. I'm going to come back to that later. So as I said, the R stories include a lot of information here that we're pulling from other sites, information we have pulled from some of those books I mentioned earlier. We are starting to get some great stories from out in the field. We just got one from Eastern Region about an early Weather Bureau forecast office overlooking the Hudson River with some great photos, well-written story that we will be posting in the next couple of weeks. So we're hoping to have an opportunity to really build this out and make this of interest to a whole lot of people. In addition, we are starting to gather some oral histories from folks like Joe Friday, and we're hoping to get to talk to Dick Hallgren, though we understand he's a bit ill. But then we're also talking to folks like you who might have some cool information that we want to share in an oral history and then provide a link in this story. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ken because we have some really cool updates coming on this part of the page. Ken, you want to take it over?
So, yeah, that'd be great. So if you notice Greg's screen here on the right, so I'm going to share mine. So basically what we've done, and this is applicable to other communities too, and we're putting a lot of effort into this. One of our programmers is a really good JavaScript programmer, and she's been doing things a bit differently. So what we've got is, there are stories. Now this is our dev server, so don't be concerned with duplicate stories here. We wanted to test with lots of different stories. What it is on the presentation, we wanted to have some more flexibility. And so what Greg was just demonstrating, it has a default sorting, and that was it. You can't change the sort. The searching doesn't work well. And then the categories in terms of the years, it shows them all, irrespective of whether or not there are any stories that actually have, that are associated with these particular years. So what we've done, or I should say, what Tao has done, is she's developed a new template that can be used with the asset publisher. So if you use asset publishers, this is something that you could potentially leverage, where this then gives us the ability to search within it. So if I want to look for a storm, it immediately filters it because it has all of the stories right there in the browser. You can change the sorting from based upon the title, the published date, and so you can make those changes and it's super fast. And so that's something that's I think has tremendous potential. We're doing some other things like this too within another community, which we'll probably highlight in a future meeting for MDL, where we've got some things like where it's going out and reading directly from a CSV file and presenting that information. So I just wanted, we wanted to highlight this because these are new capabilities that while they're going to be used in production very soon within the heritage site, they're also applicable and just something for you guys to be aware of. If you want to do some things like this within your own community, you could do so. So that's, and then we've got some links like to share it. So if, like in this case, their site is, the heritage site is public, and if you have any pages which are public, you could then click and share it via Twitter or Facebook too. So, because as we know, social media can be very important today. I think that's what I wanted to mention here, and then let's hand it back to Greg, please.
All right, thanks, Ken.
Sure.
We're pretty excited about this. I think it's going to be a really cool addition. So we're looking forward to getting that up soon. We're just kind of waiting. I want to make sure we brief Dr. Uccellini and a couple others on it, and we hope to do that in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll start rolling out those changes. You know, as Ken said, it's all about social media, and one of the things that we've learned in this process. We launched this at the NWA meeting in September, and that week we also launched what we're calling our 150 to 150 campaign. We are posting 150 days of content, social media content on the Weather Service social media properties under the hashtag NWS150 as we come up to the 100th anniversary in February. I will tell you, it's a challenge coming up with something to do daily, but our team's been doing a phenomenal job of doing that. And I'm going to just show you an example of one of the tweets that one of our recent tweets we had up. And unfortunately, it's showing media is not playing, but we actually had a little video in here. But you can see as the aviation, this was a tweet we talked about the thunderstorm project. And again, it's got a direct link to the story, our stories on the site about the thunderstorm project. Again, a great story that came out of a project that Wilmington, I think Wilmington, Ohio had done about the thunderstorm project that happened in that area in the 1940s, just after World War II. If we go back to that tweet, let's see if I can do that. I think we had something in the neighborhood of 56,000 impressions on that tweet. Really, really strong social media thing. The important point from a website perspective is that what we have learned is that social media has been a very big driver to our website. This is a view of all the users we have brought to the site since we launched in September. And you can see there's some pretty steep peaks and valleys. And part of that is that with social media being the big driver of the traffic, if we don't have a social media piece going directly to the website, it tends to drop off. Whereas if we have a really good social media story that links directly to the site, we're able to capture those folks. Somewhat embarrassingly, when we ran the story about the Edmund Fitzgerald on social media, it has been our top social media post today. Last I checked this morning, we had about 200,000 Facebook reach on that post, and in the neighborhood of 170, 180,000 impressions on Twitter from that. The sad story in that is I already showed you the article that we had on the website on our stories, and we inadvertently linked to Marquette's page instead of our own page. So we lost an opportunity to grab all that traffic onto the website. But it's a lesson learned that we need to watch and take care of that. But my point is that when you think about this site, our goal is to get as many eyes on this and have people coming back to the site over and over again because they're interested in exploring a topic about the Weather Service history, and then being able to link to stories and other information as they go on. This traffic channel chart in the analytics also shows something kind of interesting. I know it's a little hard to see in your screen, but you see the bars that at the bottom that are the dark bars. That's traffic driven by social media. And when we first started out, there was a little bit of referral traffic and direct traffic, and very little organic search when we first started out. And then all of a sudden, right here before the end of October and into November, we have a lot higher direct traffic to the site. And that is thanks to the fact that at the bottom of weather.gov, we added this link to our heritage site from weather.gov, and we also added a simpler we can redirect from weather.gov simply by typing in heritage, and it takes you to the site. So for some people having vlab.ncep.noaa.gov/web/nws-heritage, I've done that way too often, is a little difficult for some folks. So having the direct link has made it much easier. really, this has been a great experience for us. We are still sort of getting our feet on the ground on a lot of this. We're continuing to build it. I must say we couldn't have done this without the help of Ken and Tao and the work that they've done to pull this together. And as I mentioned, I'm not a techie, so their ability to handle my dumb questions has been a great resource for us. And we thank you for the opportunity to work with VLab, and I'm willing to hear any questions that you have.
Thanks a lot, Greg. That was very interesting. So if anyone has any questions, go ahead and use the raise my hand feature or the question feature. Looks like we don't have any questions,
Okay.
Greg, so.
Well, then if I can, I will just let folks know if you have any questions afterwards, if you think of it, or if you have an idea for a story, or you have feedback on the site, please let me know. You can email me at gregory.romano@noaa.gov, or if you forget that, we have on our About Us page a direct link to the projects team email, and I get that. Me and my team members get that email, and I can respond very quickly, or feel free to give me a call. We have my phone number in there as well. So look forward to hearing from folks and their ideas as well.
All right, thank you so much, Greg. Go ahead and take the screen back. And we're now, we've got 9 minutes left on the clock before we close. This is a chance now to ask any general questions about the VLab. This is the roundtable section of the owners meeting. So if you have any questions, again, use the raise your hand feature. This can have to do with anything about the VLab. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions from the audience, so all right. Wait, do we have one? Yes. Brian Mata, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I guess it's a question for Ken and the cloud team. You know, we have the AWIPS interactive reference, and we've been populating the store site with lots of quick guides and quick briefs and other content. And I guess the question is, looking forward, is there going to be a transition needed from our current setup to the AWIPS in the cloud architecture, or would that be pretty seamless?
No, there's no impact at this point in time. So yeah, AIR is well established, and it will continue to work as it is. Yeah, that's one of the complications of if we were potentially to host VLab within the cloud, is we need to have the connection, you know, from within the AWIPS network, and so yeah, there are different options there. But yeah, there's no impact on AIR, and so keep doing what you're doing. It's the right place to be doing it. So.
Okay, good to hear. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Brian. Any other questions? Okay. Seeing that there are no more questions, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. As usual, we'll be making a recording of this meeting and putting it on YouTube. And there's also a VLab page that has all the different owners groups meetings recordings. The next meeting, probably in the next 3 months or so. We don't have a date tied down just yet, but you'll be hearing about that when that happens. So Again, I want to thank both Ken and Greg for their information, and the rest of you have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.